Big news, don't know if you've heard, but Bill Gates has pledged $2.5 billion of his own personal $114 billion, I think it is, into women's healthcare. And I think this is massive. Now, you may have that skepticism where you think, oh, really wealthy man, government, politics, healthcare, surely there's some dodgy stuff going on in the background. I've included a link in the description box where you can check it out. It's just over an hour video of him being interviewed. He comes across as philanthropic, altruistic, really interested in just life and the planet and sustainability in general. So if you have any element of skepticism, I highly recommend you watch the video below. Dive into the details. The Gates Foundation is the biggest spender in R&D for malaria, TB, non-hormonal contraception, the research into the gut and the vaginal microbiome. The gut microbiome is massive of every aspect of our lives, mental, physical health, particularly menopausal women. I had no idea that he was such a big spender in that area. And obviously the vaginal microbiome too. I mean, wow, I think that's fabulous. They're the second largest spender in HIV research, second only to the US government. I think that's incredible. They've also been instrumental in vaccines, child nutrition, sanitation, and now, of course, women's health, and that includes menopause, is on their radar. They're responsible for simple innovations like the low-tech, very low-tech blood loss drape that women can use in labour. I'll talk about that in a few more minutes. And also a very small ultrasound device that can help women in rural communities in underdeveloped countries. This pledge is targeting understudied areas, things like preeclampsia, menopause, endometriosis, heavy menstrual bleeding, and the vaginal microbiome. Globally, women's bodies are often only an afterthought, and only 1% of R&D spending goes towards women's health-related issues, except for cancer. That is shocking. Maternal mortality remains a huge issue in low-income countries, and this low-tech blood loss drape essentially goes underneath the woman who's giving birth, and it catches the blood that she loses during the labour process, because doctors have historically vastly underestimated the amount of blood that is lost during childbirth. And so this is a really easy way and low cost intervention of helping prevent and reduce that significant blood loss, resulting in a lot more mothers surviving childbirth. And similarly, the low cost AI ultrasound tool is going to be really helpful for women in more deprived areas or in countries where they are still developing, and it can flag up pregnancy complications like obstructed labour or early onset preeclampsia, which would help families make informed decisions. And also it doesn't show, it's not a visual ultrasound, so it doesn't show the sex of the fetus to prevent misuse. And these innovations really matter, even though those specifically are not for menopause, because childbirth is one of the riskiest things that a woman goes through. You know, I mean, if you've been through it and you're lucky enough to live in a country that's well looked after with sort of midwives and healthcare systems, it's still one of those situations where you literally are, you transform into a different type of human being during childbirth. And it's incredibly risky. So if you're a woman in a developing country, or you're incredibly rural, or you don't have access to the higher tech stuff, these low tech innovations are going to be such a significant improvement for families who are not able to get access to the type of healthcare that we are privy to. So diving into menopause in more detail, here's a shocking stat for you. 99% of all preclinical studies ignore menopause as a factor to take into consideration, even though around 75% of age-related diseases can be or might be affected by it. Apart from the fact, if we're lucky enough to get to menopausal years, all of us women are going to go through the menopause. It's not something we can avoid. Whether you take HRT or not, it's going to happen to us all. So it's just nuts that this hasn't happened sooner. And I really love the fact that the Gates Foundation is shining the spotlight on it, and it's in the news, which means that more people are going to be talking about it. It might encourage more philanthropists and the powers that be to invest more money and also to make sure that research is done on women as well as the male animal or the male human, which is what the vast majority of studies are conducted on right now. Even if you think of breastfeeding, back in the day, I remember my grandfather saying, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a woman feeding her child. And I grew up with that message and was really proud that I was able to breastfeed both of my children. I did it discreetly, but I did breastfeed in public. I mean, yeah, if you're going to feed your baby with a bottle, you might as well feed your baby with your boob. I was just discreet in the way I did it. Thankfully, I never had any kickback. But I think these days it's a lot harder for women to breastfeed in public. It's seen as dirty. It's seen as revealing. I mean, how disconnected have we become by, breastfeeding your child is one of the most natural things that could possibly happen. And now we're becoming so sanitized. I wouldn't call it sanitized. I think it's perverse that we see it as something that is not a natural and not socially acceptable any longer. You may have different thoughts and views on that. In fact, if you do, I'd be really interested to hear below. I do believe that you need to be discreet if you're in public. Having said that, it's quite funny. The other day, I was driving round in Glasgow, and this man, I guess he was homeless. I'm not entirely sure. I'm just assuming by the way he looked, but he was carrying something in both hands. And all of a sudden, his trousers fell down. He had no underwear on. It was on a very busy roundabout in the middle of Glasgow. And I shouldn't really laugh. I mean, it's not very funny. He didn't seem bothered at all. He put his bags down and pulled his trousers up. But, when you think we are, I probably shouldn't have even mentioned that. It just sort of popped into my mind. But when you think we are categorizing women who are breastfeeding their child in public in a similar sort of vein, even though his trousers accidentally fell down, he certainly wasn't flashing. I just think there's something really wrong with society. I think we've absolutely lost the plot. But getting back to the fact that he is investing so much in this, I think it can only be good, and it can spark more conversations and hopefully lead to greater investment in the future towards women's specific health related issues. I've been studying the gut microbiome for years. As a psychotherapist, I've been practicing for over 20 years. And as soon as I heard the research that was linking our mood, depression levels, anxiety levels with an imbalance in our gut bacteria, I was like dove into it. I absolutely love research, and it's proved really helpful because there is so much out there now about the gut microbiome and how that impacts our hormone balance, our mental health, our energy levels, how we absorb nutrients from the food that we eat. And I had no idea until recently how profoundly related the Gates Foundation was to a lot of those studies that went on in the past. And just linking that to developing countries, specifically when I was listening to some of the interviews with Bill Gates, he talks about Africa. And in a large part, they're not lacking calories, but because their gut microbiomes are negatively impacted due to the lack of variation of food that they're eating, plus they're not eating foods that are fortified like we have access to with vitamin D, zinc, iron, A, those sorts of things, that their gut microbiome is not absorbing the nutrients that they do take in effectively, but they're not having the wide enough variety of food types in order to populate their gut with the healthy microbiome. Well, your gut health is absolutely foundational to how you get through the menopause. I always talk about the cortisol link, so stress management. So if you're able to manage your stress effectively, it has a profound positive impact on your menopausal symptoms. Or your gut health ties directly in to how you manage stress effectively. 90 to 95% of serotonin, one of your feel-good hormones, which is if you're depressed, the doctor gives you SSRIs. Those are designed to keep the natural serotonin that you make in your body for longer. So it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Essentially, if your gut is not creating sufficient amounts or able to create sufficient amounts of serotonin because the bacteria balance is off, that's going to have a profound impact on your mental health, neurological diseases and inflammation, and your menopause symptoms. So it's not just about us here, it's globally. Women deserve better healthcare. They deserve better understanding. And while a lot of us complain about the lack of care you feel you may get from your healthcare provider or your doctor, we still have so much more available to us here in the Western world. When I say here, UK, US, Canada, European countries, etc., than the developing countries. And so I really love the fact that he has such a global outlook and really wants to help alleviate some of the disparity that is between, the richer nations and the developing nations. I also just wanted to share a couple of nuggets with you that are not specifically related to menopause, but they're related to typically getting older. They may affect you directly, they might affect somebody that you're looking after, or they may affect somebody that you actually know. I'm talking about a couple of diseases, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. I'm going to drop a load of links beneath this video so that if you want to dive in further, you can. The articles are not super scientific. They're enough for it to be a scientific article, but they're relatively easy to understand. So as far as Alzheimer's goes, first of all, the brain produces a small amount of lithium, and that shields the brain from neurodegeneration and also maintains the normal function of major brain cell types. Scientists have found that when lithium levels in the brain drop, it increases the risk of developing Alzheimer's. In studies on mice, when they deprived the mice of certain levels of lithium in their brain, they started to show the development of Alzheimer's, brain inflammation, the plaques, etc. But interestingly, when they then started to increase the lithium levels in mice's brains, they reversed the effects of Alzheimer's. Obviously, this is still pretty early stuff, but I think that's really heartening because Alzheimer's, dementia, it's a massive killer, and it's a horrible thing to experience as a loved one or as a carer. And the fact that it could be that this lithium is the missing link to effective treatment and effective prevention, because some people also show activation of these plaques, but then never go on to develop full-blown Alzheimer's. So it's really an interesting article to take a look at if you know somebody who's got Alzheimer's, you're just interested yourself, or indeed you want to make sure that you sort of future-proof your own brain health. Alzheimer's is one of those things I would just hate to have. How you have like a scale of things you definitely don't want to get. That's one of the ones I really don't want to get. So I'm always interested in that sort of thing. And then the next study concerns Parkinson's disease and hypoxia. So hypoxia is a lack of oxygen or a reduced amount of oxygen. And scientists have been finding that people who live at a higher altitude, significantly higher altitude, so sort of Everest base camp type of higher altitude, have a lower incidence of developing neurological diseases, specifically Parkinson's disease. So there are various tests going on at the moment to, probably in mice again, to see what happens when you reduce the amount of oxygenation in the brain and to see what an impact that has. Because one of the effects of developing Parkinson's is you get more oxygenation within the brain itself. So by reducing the amount of oxygenation in the brain, it's helping to prevent neuron death and also movement symptoms associated with Parkinson's in mouse models. So this really opens up a really promising therapeutic direction as well. So just wanted to share that with you because I know a lot of us are dealing with these issues within our little pods, and I think it's really hopeful that these sorts of studies are coming out and offering just hope for the future. And the Gates Foundation contribution, I believe, really does open up a new threshold for us the fact that he is investing $2.5 billion into women's health. So if you felt resistance at the beginning when you heard Bill Gates' name, I highly recommend you watch the video that I've listed below. Our inner beliefs around money can block some of the best things. And just because he's incredibly successful, thanks to Microsoft, he also just appears to be such a philanthropic and really caring individual for global wellness, not just wellness for us in the more developed nations. So hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it hopeful. If you did, please give it a like, and if you've not yet done so, subscribe to the channel. I share a weekly video around menopause every Monday. My name is Kate Hartley. I'm delighted to have had your company for this episode, and I will look forward to chatting with you again next week.